My name is Patrice Romano, and I will be talking on water fluoridation. Water fluoridation is when the amount of fluoride in water supply is adjusted to achieve the optimal prevention of tooth decay. All water contains some level of fluoride, as it is naturally released from rocks into soil, water, and air, but in general, not enough is released to prevent tooth decay and cavities. It is also known as the most cost-effective way to deliver fluoride. A little history on water fluoridation began in the 1930s when a study was conducted that showed children who drank the water with naturally higher levels of fluoride had less tooth decay. Grand Rapids, Michigan was the first city to implement fluoride into their drinking water supply in 1945. And then by 2012, nearly 75% of all American community water systems had access to fluoride. Regarding some clinical aspects, water fluoridation is widely accepted and promoted by the American Dental Association. It is used amongst dentists for basic cleanings and also procedures and products used in the dentist office. Because dental products are generally not swallowed, they cause less concerns for possible health issues that we'll speak on later in the slideshow. On the demographics, 3 out of 4 Americans today have fluoride in their public drinking water. And as you can see in the chart provided by the CDC, in general, starting in the 1940s up until 2014, the water fluoridation has just grown exponentially throughout the entire population. As for some implications for public health, water fluoridation was named one of the Great 10 public health achievements in the 20th century by the CDC. And community water fluoridation saves money for both families and the healthcare system. For example, individuals save an average of $32 per person just by avoiding dental treatments. And it is also estimated that nationwide there is a $6.5 billion a year savings by averting dental treatment costs. So since fluoride is preventing tooth decay, it's cleaning out all of the enamel, you don't have to go to the dentist as often to get any procedures like root canals or cavity fillings or anything like that. And then also, fluoride has prevented at least 25% of tooth decay in children and adults. To get into some controversies regarding water fluoridation, it is an ongoing debate in public health, and the main controversy is the pros being that it prevents tooth decay and is cost effective, but then there have been some studies linking fluoride to fluorosis, certain cancers, and also bone fracture. So the key argument for water fluoridation, there are 5 main points. The first one being it prevents tooth decay. And this is the most efficient way to prevent because you can go across an entire span of the population. It can just reach so many more people if it's just in the water systems. And then also it protects all ages against cavities because all you have to do is just drink water, and it's a nice primary source to just avoid tooth decay. It is safe and effective. All you have to do is just drink water. And then also it saves money. And according to the ADA, the American Dental Association, every $1 invested in water fluoridation saves $38 in dental treatment costs. So it's kind of stopping the problem before it starts. And then also it's natural. It's naturally present in groundwater and the oceans. So it's not a foreign substance being added. It naturally occurs. And then some key arguments against water fluoridation all started in 1990 when a study conducted by the National Toxicology Program showed an increase in the number of bone tumors in male rats when they were given water high in fluoride for 2 years. And the change that they noticed kind of linked to a bunch of other issues in people's views of fluoride, but the main issue that people have with fluoride is that it causes dental fluorosis sometimes. So dental fluorosis is the change in the appearance of tooth enamel, and it is most common amongst children during their teeth forming years, so from ages 8 and under. And in severe forms, pits may form in the teeth, but this rarely occurs in communities where levels of fluoride is less than 2 milligrams per liter. And as we'll speak on later, the limit is 0.7 milligrams, so it's very rare to have a severe form of dental fluorosis, but it is possible. It's most common, once again, in children 8 and under when their teeth are forming. So as mentioned a little bit before, some guidelines and recommendations. The first one, created by the U.S. Public Health Service, is a concentration of 0.7 milligrams per liter of water. So this is the optimal fluoride concentration, being that it's a nice balance. So you're being protected from cavities while also limiting the risk of the dental fluorosis. So according to the Public Health Services, 0.7 milligrams is the perfect amount. And then also the FDA requires water labels to indicate when fluoride is added for bottled waters labeled as deionized, purified, demineralized, or distilled. And this is because a lot of new mothers might feel kind of uncomfortable with giving their newborn babies water with fluoride. So the FDA requires that you have to say if fluoride is added or not for those people that are kind of hesitant to give their newborns fluoride knowing it's linked to dental fluorosis during the primitive teeth-forming years and for the vulnerable population. And that was conducted by Gooch in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And then some pro-water fluoridation factors. There are 4 factors: political, clinical, cultural, and social. So for the political factor, it is the most cost-efficient nationwide for individuals and the healthcare system. So I would say in politics, most cost-efficient way is probably the way it's going to go. And then in clinical, dentists stand behind the effectiveness and the benefits of fluoride. So I feel pretty comfortable if the experts in the field are comfortable with it after years of like all the schooling they go through. If they are comfortable with fluoride, I would say it's pretty safe. And then it is also commonly used in dentist offices, toothpastes, washes, etc. So if you've been to the dentist office and got a cleaning or any kind of procedure, any like, you know, they leave you with the little like baggies of like your little like toothpaste and mouthwash or whatever, you've been exposed to fluoride in a clinical practice. And then for cultural, it is recommended by the World Health Organization as the main delivery method of fluoride. I'm assuming because it is so easy to just spread across the population. So if the World Health Organization, who focuses on a more wide aspect of people, not just national but international population, I would say it's pretty reliable. And also research across several countries is consistent in demonstrating the benefits of fluoride. And then lastly, for social, if all water systems are fluorinated, the socioeconomic status of each individual family or community will not have as great of an impact on oral health. So if you can't necessarily afford to go to the dentist, have a general practitioner, or maybe your insurance doesn't cover all your dental visits, if you have the fluoridated water, you might not even have to go to the dentist to get, you know, these procedures with tooth decay and all that. So it kind of like puts everyone on somewhat of an equal playing field in that aspect. And then how factors shape the viewpoints. So how those factors that I just previously mentioned, what viewpoints are shaped. So as for political, it being the most efficient way to protect communities' oral health, in turn, you have to have less dental procedures. So that's just good in general for the economics of the country and each individual household. It's just less dental procedures is always best because who likes going to the dentist anyway? And then as for clinical, it is widely accepted and promoted by experts in the field, as I mentioned before. So after all their years of schooling, I would assume that they know pretty much what's safe and what's not safe. I'm kind of just like trusting the experts, I guess. And then for cultural, being that it's accepted by the World Health Organization, they factor in international benefits. They're not just thinking of Americans or a certain community in America, they're talking about the wide global population. And then lastly, for social, it once again lessens health disparities between social classes, and that's always a main I would say, goal in public health, just to lessen the health disparities as much as humanly possible. So if the fluoride is in all water systems across America, regardless of the town, your zip code, it just evens the playing field somewhat. And then some factors for being against water fluoridation. For political, the Public Health Service guideline for fluoride per liter is still too high, according to some people. In an article I previously mentioned, the Gooch and Water Department of, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So some people expressed concerns that the 0.7 milligrams per liter is still too high for their comfort. So that is a factor to think about for political. And then as for clinical, it is known that certain doses of fluoride can be toxic. So being that if something can be toxic at a certain level, people still might not be comfortable with that at any level, because that is something to think of, if it could be toxic and give very adverse health effects. And then also another factor for being against water fluoridation is that toothpastes containing fluoride is known as an accepted alternative. So the ADA does recognize that toothpaste containing fluoride is an acceptable alternative to prevent tooth decay as much as possible. So if we know that toothpastes and mouthwashes and rinses and all of that can be a good enough way to get your fluoride, why do you need to drink it as well? Because it's so much easier to consume too much fluoride through water than it is to contain too much fluoride through toothpastes. And then an excess can cause enamel and skeletal fluorosis, which is a very bad circumstance. So that is one factor to be against it, because an excess can cause some certain health effects. And then as for cultural, it can go against cultural beliefs and values. That's something to think of. And then lastly, for social, less than 10% of the world's population even has access to fluoridated water. So if only, who are we to say who's deserving of it and who's not? Less than 10% of the world's population has access to it. So that's something to think about. And then how these factors shape the viewpoints. So as for political, it can still pose harm to babies and young children. And clinical, fluoride toothpastes are still effective and does not bring up dosage concerns. And for cultural, some cultures may not believe in tampering with natural sources. And then as previously mentioned, social, majority of the world does not even have access because of their natural sources of water. So some ethical considerations and actions to think of. Individual actions. So we as individuals have the freedom of choice. We all do in America. So making personal choices and your freedom, you can choose to consume fluoride by other sources. So if you don't feel comfortable consuming it by water, you can get your water in other ways, and then get your fluoride with toothpaste and rinses and like any dental procedures when you go in. And then some government actions, funding research and tracking levels of fluoride in the water. So it is important that the government keeps funding research on fluoride to make sure that it's all consistent, that it is pretty safe. And then it's also important to check the levels of fluoride in water so there's no bad circumstances with like recently we've been hearing about lead in water in different parts of America, in Michigan, and then in Newark, New Jersey, very close to home. You have to make sure the level of fluoride is at a safe level and it doesn't go above the 0.7 milligrams per liter. And then, so as I just mentioned, making sure it is not exceeded at the 0.7 milligrams to make sure it's still considered safe. And then as for global and local organization actions, you have to make sure these global organizations and some local organizations are continuing to fund research, because you can never have too much research on a topic. It's very important to just make sure, with different methods, variables, you want to make sure you have all your bases covered. And then research across the globe in developed and developing countries, because everyone, depending on your culture, your makeup, you might handle fluoride differently. So you need to make sure research goes globally, and it's not just, it needs to be reliable and valid for across all different cultures and parts of the world. And then some societal and organizational responsibilities. It is an individual in society's responsibility to report any harm, such as fluorosis. So if you live in a community, let's just say West Long Branch, and your child gets fluorosis, dental fluorosis, I would say it's your responsibility to report that, because odds are, what if your water supply has too much fluoride, and then all the other young children and people in the population might get the same thing. They're also in harm's way. And then it is also your responsibility to conduct water tests at least once a year. So if you have well water, it is your responsibility to get that checked to make sure all your minerals and all like the metals in your water are of a safe quality. And then it is the organization's responsibility to continue research with different variables, factors, and research methods, as I mentioned a little bit before. And then the decision to add fluoride to drinking water is made at the state or local level. That's something important to remember. So maybe get involved in your town council, or just get involved as much as possible if this is something you're passionate about. And then you also need to advocate for and educate on oral health, because people cannot act if they don't know in the first place. So education is key. You need to make sure everyone's educated on oral health so they can make the right decisions for themselves and what they think is right. And then also to promote various ways to prevent tooth decay, hence alternative ways to get fluoride. So if someone's educated on fluoride and they don't feel comfortable with it being in their water supply, let them know some alternative ways. Drink your distilled water and then get your fluoride to help your oral health. Get it through your toothpastes, or ask your dentist what is the best way to get it if you don't feel comfortable with it being in the water. And then some ethical considerations and constraints. You cannot assess health outcomes by giving experimental groups a high dosage of fluoride. So I was thinking of this in terms of a research aspect. It is not ethical in research to give one group, the experimental group, a high dose of fluoride, kind of like what they did with the rats in the 1990s study, and then give another group, the control group, a regular level of fluoride. That's not ethical. So while that study would give you some results, it's not ethical to do so. Same way as it's unethical to analyze the health outcomes of a population when you know they have high levels of fluoride in the water. I believe I read something in one of the research articles about, I think it was Taiwan or Japan. The people there had unsafe levels of fluoride, and there was just all sorts of health effects with like skeletal fluorosis and some very bad adverse health effects, not just like your enamel. And then also, in terms of current scientific research, the physical benefits of water fluoridation outweigh the harms. So I think that's when you think of ethics, you think of like risk and rewards, or like benefits versus harms. Due to my research and reading all I did, in terms of the current research, the benefits of fluoridation outweighs the harms of water fluoridation. And then once again, when you think of ethics, you think of your choice, individual choice. You do have the freedom of choice to make any decision. And then as for my conclusion, there is evidence on the potential benefits and harms of adding fluoride, but that evidence tends to be relatively poor. So throughout the research I did, I came across this article by Chang, Chalmers, and Sheldon, and it was conducted in 2007. Their whole research on fluoride, what they noticed is the benefits and harms of it, the evidence is relatively poor on both sides. So maybe that means more research needs to be conducted. And then also the Public Health Service found no evidence of an association between fluoride and cancer in humans. So earlier in the 1990s, there was some research done that may have put a bad thought in everyone's mind, saying like, oh, like fluoride can give you cancer or any kind of like really hard health outcomes, detrimental and terminal. The Public Health Service, as of date, found no evidence at all of an association between fluoride and cancer. And then, so that ends with saying fluorosis is, I would say, the main concern of fluoride. So when speaking on water fluoridation, I would say the main concern to think about and to consider is fluorosis. So what fluorosis is if you see, and it's more common in younger children, typically on their two front teeth, you'll see like there'll be like little like white patches or discolored patches on the front teeth. That's the enamel being broken down, and that's what dental fluorosis is. So it's very harmless unless you like it goes completely into a severe form, but most forms of fluorosis are very mild and moderate. So really all it is just kind of like an eyesore. So you'll have like little discolorations on your teeth. And that seems to be the main concern with water fluoridation. And that's it. Thank you.